£100,000. That's what it costs you, the taxpayer, to cover just one junior doctor who abandons their patients to go on strike. That's because the British Medical Association recommends consultants charge up to £269 an hour to take on non-contractual work, which includes covering junior doctors. So, junior doctors as well just ended their 44th day striking since last March today, meaning that it would have cost a hospital an extra £94,688 to cover the 44 8-hour shifts for each doctor that walked out. To be clear, and I think this is important, the BMA did call this strike during an election period, so no negotiation could take place. They want a 35% pay rise, and they recommend that cover work should cost a fortune to the taxpayer. It's remarkable, isn't it, really? Labour's Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting wants consultants' pay to be capped at time and a half when they work extra shifts, and Sir Keir Starmer last week blamed the Tories for not reaching a settlement with the junior doctors.
Not going to simply meet their demands. We can't afford that. What we will do is start negotiations to bring these strikes to an end. Now, I'm not in a position to say how those negotiations will go. What I am in a position to say is that there'll be grown-up politics where we actually resolve issues and get our hospitals back working in the way that everybody not just expects, but actually is entitled to.
But will things actually get any better under Labour? So the Tories are saying that Angela Rayner's plan to water down anti-strike laws will send Britain back to the bad old days of the 1970s. The likely next Deputy Prime Minister wants to make it easier for union barons to call a strike by lowering the threshold for member support for walkouts. Rishi Sunak today claimed Ms Rayner's plans to overhaul workers' rights will damage Britain's economy.
Angela Rayner is going to introduce French-style union laws into this country. Right, 70 of them, in fact. Right, 70 different new regulations, and that is going to mean that there's more strikes, that's going to damage our economic recovery, and it's going to cost jobs, because that's what those types of regulations do. Like, we don't have French levels of unemployment in this country, right? We've got a growing economy. Like, all of that would be put at risk if Labour were in charge and bring in all those regulations. So that's a very clear choice for you about growth.
Well, Wes Streeting has denied that he'll meet junior doctors' demands of a 35% pay rise, but what about reforms policy? They say they will wipe doctors' student debt.
And the Tories say we haven't got enough of them, but don't do anything about it. We will actually say that if they stay in the NHS for 10 years after qualifying, we will remit the whole of their student tuition fees. Because common sense says that if you want to encourage a particular pattern of behaviour, then you produce an incentive to do it, not a disincentive.
Appointments cancelled, people dying, no sign of the end of the strikes. Is the solution to end the strikes actually to wipe their student debt? Let's get the thoughts of my panel, shall we? So with us tonight we have got the Director of Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Woolfe. I've also got Esther Krakow as well, commentator and broadcaster and columnist. And I'm also joined by political commentator Andy Williams. Stephen, I'll start with you. Should we now wipe the student debt for junior doctors? If they stay in the NHS for 10 years, that will stop the strikes, won't it?
It won't stop the strikes, but I think it's a good incentive to think about, and at least somebody within the political framework is considering something outside of the box alternatively. I would have suggested not doing it all in one go at 10 years, because economics always shows that when that happens, a whole group of people decide to accept it and then possibly leave. I would graduate it like a bonus over a period of time, but leading to the same result, giving them the incentives that work. I think the key point, though, we're going to look at very clearly in this is that it won't stop the strikes, because until they get what they want, which is 35% as a pay rise, plus the other conditions that they require, they technically would still want to be on strike.
Well, Esther, I mean, there are now millions and millions of people who will probably never pay off their student loan, or certainly might take them 40 or 50 years to do so, interest rates linked to that as well. I mean, it's ridiculous in some cases, to the point where, I know we've spoken about it before, there's no point, a lot of people, I think, going to university. But Is it not quite difficult for doctors, junior doctors, to push back on something that says, look, in 10 years, guaranteed, your student debt goes?
I mean, that's one thing, which I think is quite a positive development. It's at least something that's thinking out of the box. But I think the overarching point is we are in a global competition for medical professionals. So we actually have to make the NHS, if we're going to keep it as the NHS, more attractive, not only for people within the system, but people coming in as well, because we know that about 30% of NHS workers are from overseas. And I think that's what we don't really understand, because the system that we currently have is not flexible enough to adapt to the needs. The reason why junior doctors can act like effectively like a cartel and hold the country to ransom and say, pay us 35% and we're going to keep striking, is because the NHS is not flexible enough to be able to adapt to the current supply of doctors that we have in it. If we had a system that had better working conditions, for instance, and if we had a system that had market conditions that allowed hospitals to be more flexible with the kinds of staff that they have, how much pay they offer, how they can recruit better doctors from overseas for cheaper, then this wouldn't be happening.
All right. Andy, I put it to you that the BMA were happy for the strike to go ahead, despite the fact that it's during an election campaign, so nothing can be done about it. You can't have negotiations now. That's done. People will have died as a result of this. People will have got more ill as a result of it. And their recommendation to the people doing the cover shifts is to charge, I think it was about 260 odd quid an hour, £100,000 per doctor when you work that out. And Labour actually want to give more power to the union barons.
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is that a 35% rise, that ask, is completely unreasonable. I mean, nobody in the public sector, whether they deserve it or not, and there are arguments to make for all sorts of people in the public sector who deserve pay rises, 35% is just not even within remotely anywhere near what any reasonable government would accept. However, people's pay has not kept pace with inflation in the last 15 years. So I think there is some sort of settlement that needs to be reached. Where I agree with Stephen is that what we need in these negotiations is an injection of fresh thinking, of creativity and some new ideas.
Does West Streeting give you that? Because from what I can gather, the Labour Party actually just say, well, you know, here we go, we'll give the unions a bit more rights to strike, etc. I just wonder, Stephen, whether or not more people are going to die on the NHS under Labour.
Well, it may well do. That we can't predict at the moment, but it would do if we started seeing more strikes. What I think will happen is that the unions will be like Augustus Gloop at the beginning. They'll start feeding and feasting on as much of the Labour Party's new legislation. They'll push more for increased salaries, maybe better working conditions. But as they get fatter and fatter and the conditions in the economy doesn't improve, they'll start asking for more. And only then will the government of the day, under Keir Starmer, start thinking he's got to press the button to suck them up that tube, as you would do.
At what point, Esther, do you think, or have we reached that point, I don't know, where the public actually just think that these junior doctors out on strike are a bunch of wrong-uns?
Well, it's difficult to demonise the junior doctors because in as much as it's easy to do that, we also need them. So it's quite difficult for the public. I mean, West Streeting is, to his credit, has made some good noises about the fact that, you know, you have all this expensive equipment in the NHS that basically stays dormant over the weekends because you don't have incentives for medical professionals to work overtime on the weekends, so you can actually sort of try and clear those waiting lists, which is a good point. But at the end of the day, the reason why the junior doctors can act like a cartel is because of the market, right? There are not enough doctors. So if you have the few doctors in the country holding the country by its cojones.
Well done there.
Well, yeah, basically.
I wondered where you were going to land.
Well, yeah, exactly. They can do that. They can do that. Exactly.
That's lovely, yeah.
They can do that because there are not enough of them. So you can't.
Chops it up.
Exactly. The thing is, you can't blame them for trying to get a 35% pay rise because they can do it. If they were in another country where there is a plethora of medical professionals, or you had an economy that said, actually, no, get out if you want to, go to Australia, then actually they might be a bit more reasonable. But we don't have that situation because you don't see Australian doctors coming to the UK. It's the other way around.
Is it difficult, maybe, Andy? I think you lean to the left, for want of a better phrase, especially in light of what we've just been talking about there. But, you know, to say that the Tories, look, we are where we are with them now. Nothing new is going to happen with the junior doctors with the Tories now. That they've reached the end of the road, so this is where we are. Labour, it's a bit wishy-washy. It's, well, we'll start negotiations afresh, and maybe because we're in the room, something might happen that's new. Maybe that will happen, we don't know. But reforms policy saying, well, we'll wipe your student debt after 10 years, which actually was a policy that was drawn up off the back of expert think tanks saying this is something that could work. Is it difficult, do you think, maybe to acknowledge that maybe on this reform have the best policy?
Maybe they do, and the reason I say maybe is because I don't know how much that policy would cost. What I do know is that Reform's manifesto, other than the Greens, is by far the most expensive manifesto to implement. So if you're looking at significant hikes in public spending and all the warnings around Labour there, look at Reform's manifesto, because that's spend, turn on the taps and leave them on. So I'll be interested to know how much it costs. The other point I'd make is that last year, more working days were lost to strikes than in any day since 1989. So it's not exactly been going brilliantly. And as much as, yes, people are getting fed up of saying, well, this is what's gone before with the Tories, it's not gone well. So I think this is another area where we do need a fresh start.
But the question is whether Labour will actually be able to maintain that. I think at the moment the unions will give them some leeway. But the point is, as the economy will not grow under the economy policies that we're going to see under Labour, I can't see it happening, they're going to ask for more. And with union regulations and laws being reduced, do you not think, therefore... I don't
think, to be honest, I don't think Labour is going to be as flexible with the unions as we think. No. Because if Keir Starmer gets a supermajority and he can hold on to even at least 2/3 of that in the next election after that in 2029, he can literally tell them, actually, I don't care what you do because I have 5 years minimum to do what I want.
They could also say, all right, then we'll stop giving you money. Well,
it doesn't matter. He's in government for the next 5 years.
Yeah, fair enough. OK, but I think it'd be interesting because every single Labour MP would then end up on shows like mine or on other shows as well being asked, hammered on the strikes. Do you not?
Not if you have a supermajority. You can't peel off enough support. That's the trick. You're basically a tyrant.